What's up, guys? It's your Money Cat. Hope you guys are having a good weekend so far. Today we're going to take a look at Apple, stock symbol AAPL, because I think next week is a super duper important week for Apple because of where the stock price is at right now. So let's dive right in. This is a 180-day 4-hour time frame chart. We're going to zoom in right here. Bam! Alright, so let's first discuss what has been happening so far. In the beginning of September, Apple hit the high of $138.55, then had a huge massive sell-off about 25%, then slowly bounced off of this trend line right here, which is from back in March. So very long-standing trend line. Slowly bounced back up and then actually got rejected again by this downward trend line, which I'll talk about in a second. And it's been kind of in this pattern. So in the process, Apple has been forming this symmetrical wedge pattern, which usually stock resolves it by either breaking to the upside in a big way or failing and breaking to the downside in a big way. So either way, in a symmetrical wedge pattern, usually there's going to be a big move either to the upside or downside. Now, heading into the earnings report, it seemed like Apple was actually breaking to the downside of the wedge pattern, but with the election results last week, it made an impressive rally back up, and this is where we are, which is at the very end of this symmetrical wedge pattern. So let's clear all this up and talk about what this could mean for Apple going into the future. If we just take into consideration where the stock price is at right now, we can sort of get rid of this area, just chalk it up to volatility due to election and earnings report. It's just like if stock price would have just continued to narrow into the wedge pattern. But there is going to be some kind of resolution. There's no more room to go in this wedge pattern. So like I said, it'll break to the upside or to the downside. So that's why I think next week is super important for Apple and in determining which direction Apple might be headed into going into 2021. So let's take a look at both scenarios and see where Apple could end up. First, Apple gained over 9% in the last week. And any way you cut it, this is a lot, and because of that, I think you can sort of expect a tiny pullback early next week. However, in the grand scheme of things, I don't consider this impactful whatsoever. So if we assume the stock may pull back just a little bit early next week like so, the key level I'll be looking at is this yellow line right here, which is the 50-day moving average, and I'll be seeing closely if the stock price can bounce off of that. Coming back to the bigger picture, if we do break to the upside, then I think next level to look at will be around 126 level, which is where the previous rejection happened. And in the longer perspective, I definitely think that means we are reaching the all-time high at 138. Here's why. If Apple does break to the upside of this wedge, then you can view this a couple different ways. You can view it as double bottom, which is a bullish sign. You can also look at it as perhaps a cup and handle, as well as breaking to the upside of symmetrical wedge, which is a positive signal. It may fight a little bit with this resistance at 126, but down the line, I do see it going into all-time high levels. Now, what if Apple breaks to the downside? Well, if it does this, and breaks below this 50-day moving average, then it gets a little bit dicey. The next level of support we're looking at will be somewhere between 108 and perhaps 105 or so. In that case, even if the stock bounces off there, now we're forming more of a descending triangle rather than symmetrical wedge, which is a bearish pattern. Looking at 1-year daily chart for Apple, I'm actually more bullish with this time frame. If we look at where we were in September at all-time high, RSI was overbought. MACD was very high and obviously it crossed over and we had a huge downfall. Now that the stock has consolidated within this wedge pattern, if we look at the RSI, it's at a neutral level, so we have all this room to go into if it were to break to the upside. Looking at MACD, it's very neutral, so we also have all this room to go into upside. So it's like when you cook rice in a pressure cooker, you let the steam out to decrease the pressure inside the cooker. Thumbs up if you get the reference. Aside from the chart, I think Apple has a lot of good things for itself coming up. For example, starting next quarter, iPhone 12 sales will be included in the earnings report. And in the previous earnings report, all the other sections like iPad sales, services, wearables, they were all up except for iPhone sales. But who's gonna buy an iPhone 11 when you know the iPhone 12 with 5G is coming out very, very soon? That's like buying PS4 a month before PS5 comes out, and by next year, you're not going to be able to play any of the games. I'll talk about this a little bit more in another video, talking about one of the analysts' price target of $75 for Apple. So like the video, subscribe to the channel, please, and thank you very much. And I'll see you next time.